We're often afraid of being vulnerable, but vulnerability creates genuine connection. It's a quote from Gabby Bernstein. And today I'd like to introduce you to Bree Cleal. Bree is a graphic designer, speaker, businesswoman, mother, and now, even though she hates the word, a widow. 16 years ago, she started her design studio, Imageffect. A young mother and wife with a dream of a picket fence lifestyle and a happy marriage and a creative life, allowing her to do what she loved and travel and have adventures. Her dreams were shattered in 2009 when her husband was diagnosed with brain cancer. Bree and I met at a business networking event several years ago, and at that stage, I had no idea of her background. And a conversation develops over time and takes time and trust, just as relationships do. Good morning, Bree. How are you today?
Good morning, Kerryn. I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to our conversation. Firstly, what's one thing that no one would learn from you by looking at your website?
That I am a massive Bee Gees fan, and that if you put Barry Gibb circa 1985 in front of me, I'd be a goner. That's about it.
Oh, and what is it that attracts you to Barry Gibb?
Look, I think it's all the hair and the beard and just the talent, probably too. Very talented man. He's not looking so sharp now, but he did in the 80s. I was a weird one at 14, 15, hunting down secondhand record stores so I could find Bee Gees albums. So nobody knows that about me.
So tell me a bit about Imageffect and what sort of work that you do, because that's how we originally met.
It is, Kerryn, yep. So I've run Imageffect, as you said, for 16 years, so a long time. And I started off doing logo design and branding work for small to medium-sized businesses in Victoria and interstate. And I've progressed that a bit further in that I still offer that, but I also offer what's called brand storytelling, because I find that a lot of people in business don't really understand their value and they don't know how to communicate it. So I spend a lot of time working with them on the story of their business before we actually move into the creative phase.
Mm-hmm.
And then recently I just started my speaking business as well, which is obviously based upon what we're going to talk about today.
Sure. I have a memory of one of your designs in particular, which is Kanara Springs. And when I was a child, we used to go there regularly.
A beautiful destination restaurant, Kanara Springs. And that was a lovely identity because I was able to use my hand lettering skills with that. So that's a bit of a point of difference with me as a designer in that I do a lot of hand lettering work. So behind me, if anyone can see, there's actually some of my grandma's work back there. She worked for Sports Girl in the 50s and 60s, and that's all hand-lettered work. So, yeah.
I do remember a really lovely video that you made telling that story as well. And it's those sort of
stories.
it's those stories and those conversations that always just fascinate me, and hence why I started a podcast, because I'm so interested in why people do what they do and how do they get to that situation. And I can even remember a conversation at the event we met at when we were there to promote business, and you ended up talking skirt and dress design and manufacturing with another one of the participants there. So conversations can lead you to all sorts of common interests. So you have a daughter?
I do. I'm a single mum now to a 16-year-old daughter. So that keeps me occupied. And one of the reasons working on that Kanara Springs identity was lovely was because it was close to where I was living at the time. So for the last 20 years, I had lived in the Dandenong Ranges. So at the end of last year, I made the decision to pack up our family home and move closer to the city. So now I'm in Kew, which is good. It's very, very different in an apartment, but I'm not managing such a huge property as I was on my own up in the Dandenongs. I've got a little bit more time to focus on what I want my life to look like.
So your life was going along, and when I met you, there were things changing in the background that I knew nothing about. What happened in 2009? What changed, and what was that?
Well, we were chugging along as a family, working and paying off a mortgage and doing all the things that you do. And my husband all of a sudden started having these what I now know were absent seizures. So he'd be talking to me and then all of a sudden he'd sort of check out for about 30 seconds, go a terrible colour. And I thought, that's a bit odd. And I said to him, you think you need to go to the doctor, but being typically male, sorry, big generalisation, he wouldn't go. So he didn't go for a while actually. And eventually we found out that he had brain cancer. So there was a tumour in his brain. And I remember going to find out about that. It's just like emblazoned in my mind because I walked into the waiting room with my daughter, who was 4 at the time, holding my hand, and the doctor was waiting for me in the waiting room because Serge had gone in before me. And I just remember him jingling change in his pant pockets. And he took me into this room and showed me these scans and said, your husband's got a brain tumour. And I immediately said, no, he hasn't. You've got the wrong scans. Total and utter denial. So our world just really fell apart.
I can't even imagine. It would be terrible.
Yeah, and I think that was the only time we ate McDonald's was that night, waiting for a neurosurgeon to come into the hospital. We ended up eating McDonald's, and we weren't that sort of family. So, yeah, anyway, that's what basically happened.
And how did Serge react to the diagnosis?
Look, he took it in his stride initially. Then when they did the surgery, he got a pulmonary embolus, which is a blood clot in your lung. And I think that unfortunately made him very suspicious of the medical profession because he was in a lot of pain and really, really sick not long after surgery. There were arguments in the emergency ward between me and nurses who wanted to give him blood thinners straight out of brain surgery. And I was just like, common sense, you don't do that. And until the neurosurgeon was able to come in and take him again as a patient, I wasn't going to let anyone do that. So he then decided after that first surgery that he wasn't going to have treatment. So that was another like furphy for me to kind of get my head around. That was really, really hard because I was sitting there thinking, you've just been told treatment will help. We've got a daughter. You've got another daughter, my stepdaughter. At the time, what are you actually going to do here? And he said, no, I'm going to go to the Gawler Institute. I'm going to be vegan. I'm going to do all this stuff. And I just remember feeling so anxious and so stressed about it that I didn't really know what to do. I was just at a loss. And then one day I went to sleep at night, and it's the strangest thing. It was like someone got into my head, twisted it round, and I woke up in the morning and I just went, I don't own him. I don't own his decisions. I don't own him just because I'm his wife and he's my husband. This is what he wants to do. I've always got a choice. So I could have chosen at that point to say, hey, I can't go through this with you, which is what happens a lot in marriages when one person is diagnosed with something like Serge had. And I said, I'm going to stay. I'm going to support this. Thinking at that point that he would go back to work. But unfortunately, he never went back to work.
So that would have changed your life in so many ways. Yeah. So what did that mean for you and for Imageffect and your life as a mother and wife?
Yeah. I was shattered. I just thought, this isn't the way it was meant to go. I think it's really interesting when you marry someone, and I may have a bit of a jaded view based on the way my marriage worked out. It wasn't all bad, but it was challenging. I think sometimes you fall in love with the potential, not actually who the person actually is. So that can be challenging. Elizabeth Gilbert talks a lot about that. You fall in love with the potential. So I always thought that Serge would do what my dad did, which was work really hard, support everyone. I was quite happy being a wife at home, making the dinner, working, being the secondary breadwinner. I was happy to work, yes. But I almost wanted to put the way I'd grown up onto my marriage, very common. And I just had to let go of all of those ideas. I just had to let them go and just go, this is the situation that I'm in. Again, I've got a choice. I can stay or I can go. So it was just this whole letting go of this dream and the way that I thought life would work out, and putting my big girl pants on and saying, well, this is the situation that we're in. I have this little business which is growing, and now I have to earn enough to support us all. And I did. And I talk a lot about being consciously resilient. So consciously, that was a conscious decision. We always make these decisions, and we've always got choices all the time what we're going to do. And I decided to support him as best as I can. I loved him. We had a child. I wanted to do the best that I could for everybody. And so I worked my little butt off, Kerryn.
Yeah, I can recall how hard you were working, but I had no idea of the backstory. So I was following along on social media and seeing your work and watching your videos about your grandmother's life and whatever, but I had no idea. That side of your life you held quite tightly, I think. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, that's something that I reflect on now and wonder whether that was such a good idea, because I just put this brave face on all the time. And I mean, Serge had a journey with brain cancer that was nearly 8 years long. So there were 4 neurosurgeries in there, multiple issues with his health, a lot of cancer treatments, radiotherapy, chemotherapy were thrown at him, trial drugs. And every 3 months, he had an MRI. So we'd have to go to hospital, get the results of the MRI, and you'd sit there in what I call now the anxiety chairs, waiting to go into to get the result. Every 3 months for nearly 8 years. And it was me who was there with him. I did every check, I think, bar maybe 2 in that period of time. And yeah, it was tough. But I didn't tell anyone about it because I felt like it looked unprofessional. So I never ever let anybody know what was going on, unless there was a situation where he'd been in hospital, and I had to sort of step away from the studio for a few days. But I remember walking up and down the stairs from my studio to our bedroom, nursing him, and then going back down and doing design work. It was insane. I look at it and just go, how on earth did you process enough to be able to do a good job for people? But I did. It's just like compartmentalizing parts of your life and just going, well, this is what I got to do now, and this is what I got to do tomorrow.
I think we perhaps do that. I know that I've had occasions where you use it as a buffer too. It's just goes into another transition space that I just go on with this, and then I don't have to think about that. So I think the quote at the beginning about being afraid to be vulnerable is true, because we know that we might fall apart and we can't. So we actually just need to keep pushing through all the time, pretend that's not happening, in a sense, I think. And but I'm not sure if that's the best way to get the support that you need, because I'm sure you needed support to get through. You can't do all these things alone. So how did that work for you? Did you feel supported by the people that did know?
Yeah, I had a select group of people around me who were close friends that knew our family background. And then I always had a business coach. So I still have her today. So she took me through that whole period of time. But it took me a long time to admit that things were very, very tough. And I think my admission is clearer now than it was then, because I'm out of it and I realized just how difficult and challenging it was. But always right through that period, there's choices. There are choices, and we can either consciously, and I remember consciously thinking to myself, well, my choice is I can keep this business afloat, I can earn enough money to support us all, or I can go and sit in a corner and rock. What's the option? And then I remember saying, I'm going to actually keep pushing through. I'm going to keep on doing this. And that's what the being consciously resilient, I talk about. and trying to find beauty in what is. So Byron Katie's loving what is statement, I thought was really good, because we can always look at the grass is always greener on the other side, but what can I find now that's beautiful, that I'm grateful for?
Yes. So what sort of tools or did you use to become resilient? When I say tools, obviously I don't mean hammer and nails, but what did you draw upon to give you that inner strength to become resilient?
I think being with myself, having a relationship with myself, and figuring out who I needed to help me have that. I'm a really big believer in therapy. We take a car to be serviced every 6 months. Why wouldn't we take ourselves in to be serviced as well? So any opportunity you've got to express what's going on for you and work through it, I think is good. So therapy. Obviously, my business coach from a business perspective works really well. And then good friends as well. I had some of which on a really bad day, because things were sometimes pretty tough. I'd just go over to their house on a Saturday afternoon, just have a break and be plied with gin. So that was, needed a drink. One of the biggest things, so what I've just said all comes back into accepting vulnerability. So accepting when things are hard and working out ways to manage it. And when I say consciously resilient doesn't always mean that you've got your crap together. It can also mean I'm trying really hard here and I'm really conscious that I need to be resilient, but actually I need these other people to make that happen. So asking for help, having a care pack, finding out who else is on this journey too. And that was a really hard one, and one of the reasons that I want to do more of this public speaking is because I saw so many women in the same position as me in hospital, and I couldn't talk to them. Brain cancer is horrible because after surgeries, personalities change, motor skills can be altered. I remember seeing a woman, putting on her husband's socks because he couldn't do it anymore. And I just really wanted to talk to her. But in those environments, it's really difficult and everyone's stressed and it's fast moving. And there was just not the space I felt, especially for a young woman, because I was only 34 at the time Serge was diagnosed, to actually talk about all of the things I've mentioned to you, which is just, this is actually not how my life was meant to play out. Hey, stop. There wasn't anyone to talk to.
No.
So finding others who are on the same journey as you is really good. And then practicing gratefulness. So every day, no matter what, I would write down 3 things before I went to sleep at night that I was grateful for. And it could have been the sun shone beautifully through my curtains this morning and created this lovely light. The cat slept with me last night. I mean, they were just little things, but they were nice things to remind me that everything was okay.
Yes.
I could still find the good.
I recall you carrying that on after Serge passed away too, and you shared gratefulness posts for some time on social media, and yeah.
100 days grateful, and that was one of the best ways I had to let people know that he'd actually passed away. He was so private, and that was partly why I probably didn't talk about it a lot. If any of our friends wanted to talk about his results, he'd walk away, so they'd come to me. So it was difficult with that, and I just felt that was a really nice way to honour his passing, doing the 100 days grateful.
Yes, I think it's very difficult. I haven't had anyone in or supported anyone through brain cancer, but I have through ovarian and breast cancer. And everybody, my friends handled it very differently. They, both of them didn't want to talk about it, and which was totally understandable. One was more philosophical and stoic about just pushing through, and the other one found it more difficult, much more difficult. And having conversations with them was very difficult as well. And I'm sure, when someone's dying, conversations are really, it's a sticky and stuck position you can find yourself in. So did you have support from friends and professionals to help you have those difficult conversations? And
yeah. I'm the sort of personality, Kerryn, that if I don't know how to do something, I'll find someone who does and I'll learn from them. I'm really very much that way. So as things started to progress, it was so hard because, my husband didn't want to die, and, nobody, young man when he was diagnosed. So that was very difficult. I remember him turning around to me at one point and saying, geez, the cat's probably going to outlive me. And I said, oh, well, we'll see, trying to keep it bright. So I went to Eastern Palliative Care. I spoke to I got help there. I got help from the Cancer Council about what to do with children when somebody's dying, what I could expect in a hospital environment. We had this whole idea that he would die at home and we would use Eastern Palliative Care. And that was something that we discussed together. But I would always phrase it with, if we ever need this, Serge, I need to put these things into place. I need to put these things into place for my safety, your safety, and the kids. To the end, I never said you're dying. So
no.
So the hard part there, though, was that he actually, and the whole idea of him passing away at home, had a massive seizure, and I realised on the phone to emergency services that I couldn't lift him, I couldn't move him, I couldn't do anything. I just had to make other decisions, and that was the hardest thing because he never wanted to be in a hospice, but that's where he ended up for the last sort of 6 to 7 weeks of his life. And I was there every day. The girls were there. But again, it was about working out, well, what do I need in that environment to get through? I knew that my daughter needed space to say, I can't be here, Mum, because she was only 12. So what do you do? I just didn't want her to get to 21 and think, Mum shut me out and I wanted to be there. So I allowed her to make those choices, but I always had someone I could call on who was available to either be in the hospital at the same time, take her away, half an hour for a walk, over to where an ice cream, whatever she wanted to do. But yeah, I sought out people that could help me always.
I think that's a key, isn't it? Is being able to know who you can count on, where you can find them, and there's always a pathway through. You just have to look for it and use your support network to find what it is that you need. Because even with this conversation, there may be some people that are listening that it's not their situation that they're going through, but they have a friend or a family member that's in the same sort of situation, and they can perhaps be able to support them and give them some thoughts or make them feel more comfortable about their decisions that they're making, and put a different viewpoint forward or a different perspective that the person can therefore make an informed decision themselves about the way forward.
Absolutely. But always ask. There are an incredible amount of organisations out there to help, but you've got to push and you've got to ask.
So how has your world changed now?
I feel like it's wrong of me to say it's easier, because it is in some ways, but it's harder in others. Parenting children who have lost their significant parent is very difficult. And because I was the one that was working all the time, my daughter spent a lot of time with her dad. So he was the one that went, when he was well, he did maths at the school, he went on the school excursions, he did all that. So when he wasn't there anymore, that was a huge loss for her. Again, it's just about letting go. It's about being kind to yourself and to her. There was a period of time where, she didn't always go to school. And it was just about, well, what can you manage this week? What can we do? And again, finding people to support us in those vulnerable times. But yeah, certainly things are good with her. She's started at a new school, so that's great, loving that. And I think for me, I've got other opportunities. Life's opened up. I've made choices that are for me. They're not about everybody else.
Yes.
My choices were often, as women, that's what we do. That's not just me, but I think as women, that's what we do. So it's just about me now looking at my life and thinking about how I want it to look.
So what things would you tell others who face into a similar situation?
That there's always a choice. There's always a choice. And the choice might simply just be to get up in the morning. It could be as simple as that. You've always got a choice. You've just got to find it, and it rests ultimately with you. You can't really rely on other people. You've got to pull yourself up. And that's what I mean about being consciously resilient. You've got to make the choice to want to keep going. Having a relationship with yourself is as important as having good quality supportive relationships with other people. So spending time with yourself, working out what can I do here? How can I make this better for me? And in that, admitting perhaps when things are challenging and you feel vulnerable, and finding people to help you in those circumstances. Because it's interesting, once we actually admit things are challenging, it can bring about great change. And certainly when I spoke last year did my public speaking for the first time, it was very vulnerable and raw, but that's what touched people. That's what made people want to listen. And I think that was, a really good lesson for me in actually learning to be vulnerable. And also that we can learn from others, that there's definitely space for us to learn from other people.
Yes. I was having the same conversation yesterday with another business owner about being vulnerable and not being, feeling that you can let people know, because you won't be the only one that's in that situation, and people relate to that, and that's how they connect with you, and the right people will hear the message and get the support from that you've got through it, that you've managed to get through, and that it is doable, and it's not without its challenges and its rocky road and its roller coaster, but it is doable. And
I remember thinking so many times, I'm not going to get through this, especially as things got really hairy towards the end. I thought, this is, I don't know whether I'm making all the right decisions here. This could just go absolutely wrong, especially when there's kids and challenging family situations involved. It's just really tough. But, trust, have faith in yourself, and find the people that you need to get you through.
Yeah. And to finish on a lighter, brighter note, but honest conversations are so important. And sometimes I think we don't go deep enough in a conversation. And, people will say, how are you? And someone will say, I'm good. But that's not necessarily the truth. And, you need to be perceptive and be able to pick up on someone's body language or their tone of their voice or the look in their eye or whatever, and go deeper than that initial response, because it's very easy to say, I'm fine. And that's not the truth. So we've had a bit of that conversation. So on a lighter note, if you came to a YTM event now, you might get dealt a card, and the card might ask you to respond to this question, which is, what do you hope to do now or in the future that you've never done before, Bree Cleal?
Is this the question that we talked about?
I think it's a wonderful uplifting answer.
If I could do anything in the world, anything that I wanted to do, I would go and knock on Rod Stewart's door, and I would say to him, I can be your backup singer. Let me wear the short dress and dance up there and sing.
Well, I hope there's somebody out there listening who could make something like that happen. I mean, I have seen, Elvis lookalike type people. Maybe there's a Rod Stewart lookalike person out there. It wouldn't be quite the same, but maybe there is someone out there. That's very inspiring. So I hope.
I often do it in the kitchen with a spoon. I'll stand and sing along to it. Pretend to be the backup singer. I'll let all my secrets out today, Kerryn.
That's good. That's being vulnerable. How can people connect with you, and how could you help them?
Okay, so if they need design work, they just go to imageffect.com.au and they can reach me through that site. If they're having trouble as a business owner really working out what it is that they offer that's wonderful and how to put that into some kind of language and visual mark, then that's where I can help them there. If people are looking for a public speaker who is funny and takes them on a bit of a harrowing journey through her own life, but there's always light at the end, they can reach me at breecleal.com.au. That's my website. I'm interested in talking to cancer support groups because I didn't feel like I found a lot of those in my journey. Business groups, female-centered groups. But one of the things I noticed when I first did this talk, and a lot of people watched the talk that I did, was that men were as equally interested and felt that they could learn a lot from this idea of being consciously resilient. So,
yes,
business groups. I'll talk to anyone, Kerryn.
And would you like to share a quote with us just to finish off?
Yes, I would. Thank you. If you feel lost, disappointed, hesitant, or weak, return to yourself, to who you are, here and now. And when you get there, you will discover yourself like a lotus flower in full bloom, even in a muddy pond, beautiful and strong. That was by Masaru Emoto.
Forward to watching the next stage and the new chapters in Bree Cleal's life. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kerryn. Thanks so much.